Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about In His Shadow. In His Shadow is a French crime drama that tells the story of Adama, a blind man living in the Marais projects with his family. While he's happy with almost everyone, he has a tenuous relationship with his half-brother Ibrahim, owing to his own animosity toward their father Usman. When their father unexpectedly dies following a medical episode, Ibrahim becomes more deeply involved in crime and more authoritative over his family. Caught in the middle of a gang conflict between Ibrahim and his rival, Amada has to find a way to end or escape the conflict before consequences begin to escalate. What started as an average but somewhat captivating story about the impact of crime and how it can affect those related to the perpetrator ended up being a mess of random ideas and unrealized potential. While there is some merit behind its dark presentation, much of it is lost amidst the utter confusion of its story structure. Adama was a decent protagonist for the story, although not done as well as he could have been. His motivations for everything he does in the story are sympathetic, as all he wants to do is protect his family from the crime happening around him, yet he keeps finding himself dragged into it due to his brother's lifestyle providing for them. He helps keep the story moving along as best as he can, but in the end he just wasn't interesting. The only other noteworthy trait about him was his passion for music, which is only seen a couple of times and never builds throughout the story or has anything to do with it later. His blindness was a big source of contention for me, as it rarely affects anything that happens in the story. He's somehow able to navigate entire neighborhoods and find specific buildings by himself without so much as a seeing eye dog, and his acute sense of hearing is inconsistent, as he's able to hear quiet noises several floors down a building but unable to hear them within his own apartment. He's essentially meant to be the compassionate counterpart to his brother Ibrahim, who also proved disappointing as a character. I appreciated the backstory the movie gave to his character to explain why he lives a life of crime despite his father and be independent from him, but once this is given, he ends up being little more than just another thug. There's not much else to say about him other than that. His relationship to his mother and other relatives are only explored at the most basic level without anything resembling a loving family dynamic. This is kind of the point, as it's meant to show how far Ibrahim strayed from them, but it doesn't change how ordinary he is as a kingpin criminal. The relationship between him and Adama is the only one with any sort of nuance involved. Their antagonistic relationship and the few scenes they share together do warrant some dramatic intrigue, as the two couldn't be any more opposite from each other. One is compassionate, while the other is ruthless, and seeing them butt heads with each other does make for interesting drama. The problem is that this dynamic doesn't always play out. One moment Ibrahim might have some degree of respect for Adama, and in the next he'll want to kill him. Add to the fact that they don't share many scenes together, as I said before, and it leaves the central concept of the movie feeling confusing at best and pointless at worst. The movie fails to adequately explore the blended family dynamic between Adama and Ibrahim's backgrounds, which is unfortunate because the potential is there. The rivalry between relatives from a cultural point of view and all the different connections they had to each other is interesting to see. However, most of this rivalry is only explored in the opening scenes of the movie when it dishes out a heap of exposition. Once this is over with, most of the drama boils down to wars of words between Ibrahim and whatever relative he has an issue with, so it's not exactly riveting. There's so many supporting characters in this movie that don't add anything to it and only show up like once or twice, yet it expects the audience to treat them like important characters. There's one subplot involving Adama's friend Malik and how he hides his relationship with Ibrahim's sister Aisata, but it's only touched upon in a few scenes, ends up going nowhere, and wastes valuable screen time as a result. The movie's story and pacing in general is all over the place. The inciting incident where Adama has to deal with Ibrahim's criminal activity takes almost half an hour to get going, and even after all the exposition in the beginning is finally over with, the movie still trudges along at a snail's pace. Part of the problem is that I didn't understand the whole point of the conflict that Ibrahim is caught up in. He's involved in a gang war with some random guy named Eddie who's never introduced until he's name dropped, and even when he does show up on screen, he fails to resonate. At that point, it became another cliché crime story of two gangs going at it in impoverished neighborhoods, with even the police responses to the crime or lack thereof not being much of note either. Adama's plight from being stuck in the middle of this conflict only does so much to add any kind of variety to what is otherwise a typical tale of gang warfare. This is until the movie starts getting closer toward the final act, which is when it goes from being boring to completely ridiculous. A bevy of illogical events add up one after another, which ruins any sort of suspense the movie might have gained from its previously gritty and realistic presentation. Much of this is due to the witchcraft scenes, which still baffle me to this day. Adama has some sort of spiritual connection with a mysterious deity that gives him the motivation to power through Ibrahim's actions, and it makes no sense. Apart from the exposition at the beginning, which still remains vague anyway, there's zero setup behind anything related to the witch scenes, and they frequently disrupt the tone of the story with how outlandish they are. There's one moment in particular at the halfway point where something so ludicrous happens to Automa after interacting with the witch, I found myself squinting at the movie for a good minute or two. The only clue I could gather about them is that it has something to do with Automa's family name Kita, which apparently is supposed to refer to some sort of blessing in African culture, but it never amounts to a cohesive whole. It's a shame that the movie is so at odds with itself with whether it wants to be realistic or supernatural and tries to have it both ways, because neither of them work. And I say it's a shame because there are things the movie gets right. I love how it depicted its project settings and the cultures within them. The decrepit buildings and the numerous ne'er-do-wells living within them give this constant feeling of danger, like something bad could happen to Automa at any given moment. The dark tone of the story is intensified by its lighting and creative use of cinematography. Whenever something sinister is happening on screen, the movie does a good job at showing Automa and Ibrahim's perspectives, highlighting the different worlds these two see themselves in. The movie tries its best to explore its central theme regarding the vicious cycle of crime and how people are caught up in it, but it only goes so far. It switches so much between the type of story it tries to tell and falls so short in other areas that it just falls apart. Overall, In His Shadow is a subpar crime drama that's stuck in the shadow of many other movies like it that are much better in comparison. If you like crime dramas and want to watch one centered around gangs and families caught between them, you might enjoy it, but for me, it wasn't very impressive. If the movie had a more persistent idea of what it wanted to be and expanded more on its cultural elements, it probably would have landed a lot better than it did. I wanted to appreciate the things it did right more, but confusing plot elements and the lackluster story and characters left a lot to be desired. What did you think about this movie? Did you enjoy the dynamic between the two brothers, or were you also disappointed by its execution? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of In His Shadow. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Belgian thriller, Noise. Bye bye!